In the video about sending email in college, we talked about some of the cultural and social rules and expectations for sending email when you're a college student or when you're sending email in a university. This video is also about social rules and expectations, but this time we're going to focus on the rules and expectations that have to do with time in college. So of course, when I talk about rules, I'm not talking about the kind of rule that's like a law where if you break it, you can get punished, but I am talking about the social expectations of the place. Different cultures have different ideas about time, and we know this is true when we look at cultures around the world. For example, I used to teach international students, and we often had a problem when we tried to schedule things because the students from different countries had different expectations for what time meant. So someone might say, we're going to start the meeting at 7 p.m. The student from Germany would arrive at 6:55, from Nigeria wouldn't get there till 8, from Brazil around 7:30, and the Chinese student would come exactly at 7 on the dot. So even though we had said 7 o'clock, that meant different things to different people. And you probably know this from your own experience. When somebody says a party starts at 7, in your group of friends, that might mean arrive at 7:30, or it might mean arrive at 6. It depends on the culture that you're used to. So if you got a message that said, we're having a meeting that starts at 7, based on the way things are in your family or at your job, when would you arrive? In college culture and academic culture, the expectation is that you will arrive on time or a little bit early. So 5 minutes early, maybe 10 minutes early. Any earlier is weird or not polite. And certainly any later is not polite. And this is also true when things are happening online. So if you have an online appointment for office hours with a professor, or you have a Zoom that you're supposed to be part of, the expectation is that you will be there exactly on time or a little bit early. So people who work in colleges have really full schedules, and it's pretty common for somebody like a professor or somebody who works in student services to have a plan for every single minute of their day. Because that's true, you usually can't talk to somebody at the university on short notice. So if you call somebody in financial aid or you call a professor, you probably won't be able to speak to them right then. The culture in the university is that you should make an appointment if you want to have a longer conversation with somebody that can't be had in email or text. We usually schedule those appointments about a week or so in advance. So if you want to talk to financial aid, you want to talk to a professor, then you start trying to set up that appointment a week early. Now, sometimes things happen as an emergency. Maybe you need to talk to financial aid right away. And when that happens, you'll send an email and try to schedule an appointment sooner, letting them know that there's a deadline for what you need. Pre-planning is a huge part of academic culture. It's a big part of college culture. And because most of the people who work or participate in the university are used to that culture of pre-planning, they're going to expect you to do that too. So at a PWI like Eastern, a predominantly white institution, the rules about time are rooted in white Western culture. And part of the belief in this culture is that time is a thing that belongs to people. And because time is our possession, something that belongs to us, it means that you can take time from people, which is like stealing. It means you're taking something valuable from that person. And because of this idea that time is a thing that can be stolen, people who work in colleges might be emotional or have an emotional response if you don't show up exactly on time as expected, or if you miss an appointment completely, because they're going to have that cultural feeling like you stole something from them. To them, it'll feel like you are taking their time and that you're doing that because you don't think their time is valuable, you don't respect them. If the cultures that you usually move in don't see time this way, it might be kind of confusing or surprising when people take it personally or take it as an insult that you arrive late or that you don't show up for an appointment. But the reason they're reacting that way is because of their cultural framework, where they see time as a valuable possession that can be stolen from them. People in the university probably won't stop to think that you might move in other spaces that have different ideas and attitudes about time. They're probably going to assume that you see time the same way they do. So if you stole their time, it was because you thought it was okay to steal their time. And that's why they're taking it as an insult. For people who work and study in college, time is very personal. And because of that, doing things on time and according to the rule, right, on time or a little bit early, is a sign of respect. So let's look at time as it relates to assignments for class. Many professors feel about assignments the same way other people in the university feel about scheduled appointments. Many of the professors in the university see the deadline for assignments the same way they see appointments. And so they are thinking about time the same way. Receiving something late might feel to the professor like a sign of disrespect for the class or for the work or for what you're studying, or it might even feel like a sign of disrespect to them. Again, because all of us are used to the university culture, there's also a danger that they might be making judgments about you based on their own cultural expectations about time. In college culture, there is a bias for or towards people who do things according to deadlines. It carries a bunch of assumptions about your personality that are actually not related to time at all. Professors tend to see people who do things on time as people who respect them, people who by character are serious and hardworking. And again, even though it's not related, they tend to see people who do things on time as more intelligent. And that can cause a lot of friction when people come from different time cultures into the college time culture. So you might have a family or a workplace that has exactly the same time culture that we have here in the university. But you might not. You might have a family or a workplace that sees time totally differently and has a totally different attitude about time and what it means to be on time. If that's your situation, there are some ways to help you adapt to the college's idea about time. It is incredibly, incredibly helpful, and I would say maybe necessary that you have a calendar, either a physical calendar or a digital one, whatever feels most comfortable for you. So as you can see in this example, the person has scheduled things that have a time. For example, they have a swimming practice that's from 7 to 8 a.m. They can't change the time. That's the time of the practice, and they put it in their calendar. But they also put study in their calendar. They're going to study from 9 to 11:30. Even though they could study at any time, they're blocking out time in the calendar to study. That way they know when it's going to happen ahead of time, and they're not just waiting until they have free time to study. I also strongly recommend that you include rest in your calendar. If you pack up your calendar and there's no time for having a break, scrolling on Instagram, watching TV, or sleeping, you're going to get burned out pretty quickly. So if you look at the example here at the bottom of Monday, they gave themselves some free time for a few hours just to do whatever they want to do. So please include rest when you're putting your calendar together. If this is not your habit, it's a great habit to start while you're in college. At the beginning of the day, take a look at everything you have to do. So start the day by getting a sense of what's going to be required and when it's going to happen. If this is not your time culture and you're getting used to it, there is a period where you're learning, and that period is a little bit difficult. The hardest part is making the habit. If you're not used to putting things on a calendar, you're not used to looking at a to-do list at the beginning of the day, it takes a little while to build the habit. While you're building the habit, you can help yourself out by keeping your schedule close to you. If you're a tech person who's always looking at your phone, keep your schedule on your phone. If you're a pen and paper person, make sure that calendar is always close to where you are. Maybe keep it in the bag that you always carry. You can also set an alarm. If you're not used to doing unscheduled things based on a schedule, like if you're planning to study at 3 o'clock, but there's no scheduled class, it's just the time that you gave yourself to study, set an alarm so that when the alarm goes off, you know, okay, it's time to start studying. And also set an alarm for when it's time to stop. Stopping is just as important as starting. Make sure that you're following the schedule in a way that leaves time for you to do what you need to do and for you to rest. So for some of you, this time culture is new. For some of you, this is the time culture you're used to. Either way, sometimes you're going to mess up. We can't all be on time all the time, no matter what our culture is. And people in college know that. Even with college culture, with its strict rules about time, we know that people aren't perfect. We expect that you're going to run late sometimes, both for things that you might be attending and with your assignments. Because we know that people run late sometimes, we also have smaller social rules inside the college about how to behave when you're running late. In college culture, if you're going to be late or if your assignment is going to be late, the polite thing to do is send a message. And here are kind of the guidelines for the message. The sooner, the better. The instant you know that you or your assignment might be late, even if it's a few days out and it's possible that you might get it, the sooner you let the person know that you might be late, the better it is, the more forgiving they're going to be. When you let somebody know that you're going to be late or your assignment is going to be late, it's polite to apologize. I'm sorry, I know we were going to meet at 7, but I probably won't be getting there until 7:05, right? That I'm sorry shows that you know what the cultural expectation is and you understand that you were the one who broke it. Even if your reason is serious or legitimate, within college culture, we still apologize. So you end up saying something like, I'm sorry, my paper is going to be late. My son is in the hospital. How professors and other people in the college respond to lateness is really based on your way of presenting the lateness. So in the first scenario, we have a really serious situation. My grandmother is really sick. I'm worried I'm not going to be able to do the paper in time. So the paper isn't due yet, but this person sees that their grandmother is sick. They're going to want to spend time with their grandmother. They cannot prioritize this paper over spending time with their grandmother. And so they say to the professor, I'm worried I won't be able to do it on time. Generally, the response from the professor is going to be generous, right? Well, I can give you an extension on the deadline. How much more time do you need to do it, right? Maybe you need a little more time to get this done. In the second scenario, the Zoom class was last night or the Zoom meeting was last night. And the person says, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. My grandmother was sick. Same scenario, equally serious, equally as important. But the professor doesn't receive it well because the apology comes after the thing was missed, right? You should have emailed me. It's too late to reschedule the conversation now. And that's probably what you're going to find. If you tell the person ahead of time, you're more likely to get a good response than if you tell the person afterwards. In these scenarios, again, it has to do with when you find out. This guy texts his professor, I'm going to miss our meeting. My wife is in labor. The professor completely understands, says no worries. I hope. If you have a professor who wants you to meet, even though your wife is in labor, that's a problem with the professor. In the second scenario, the guy is in the hospital. I don't know when I can turn my paper and I'm in the hospital. Again, the professor understands. Just tell me when you get out. But in the third scenario, the guy was in the hospital, maybe for a couple of days, really serious situation, scary situation. And when he feels better, then he emails the professor, I'm sorry I didn't hand in the paper, I was in the hospital. You're not going to get such a good response. I wish you had told me it's too late to turn it in now. So the priority is on before, not after. As usual, these are social and cultural rules, so they have social and cultural consequences. If you apologize before you or your assignment is late, it's considered polite, responsible, it gives a good impression. In general, people will forgive you and they'll be willing to give you an exception or to work with you. But if you apologize after you or your assignment is late, it might be considered disrespectful. You might be judged as irresponsible when other judgments that we talked about that come with being late, and the person might not be willing to help you or work with you. All right, so let's say you get to this position where you didn't say something ahead of time, you were late, now the work is late, now you have to make a decision, even though you didn't take the best cultural path for lateness. Again, there are kind of two roads you can take. The first one is you can apologize after you were late, right? Just like the guy did in the previous scenario. I'm really sorry I didn't hand in the paper. I was in the hospital. I couldn't get to a computer or a phone. There was nothing I could do, right? This isn't the ideal situation, but the professor will help you find a way forward. The worst thing you can do is ghost, right? You were late, the paper was late, and now it feels like it's too late to do anything. So you never apologize. You never send an email explaining why you were late or the paper was late. You never communicate. This makes people feel hurt and worried about you. Not being responded to at all is the worst thing that you can feel as a professor. When you reach out or you're supposed to have an appointment, a person disappears and you never know why. You get really worried that something happened to that person, and also you feel like they didn't care about you or take the meeting seriously, and that's upsetting too. These can be really hard to move forward from, mostly because we can't get in touch with you. Like, there's no way to resolve the problem because we never heard from you again. The worst thing you can do is ghost. If something is going on, tell your advisor, tell the professor, even if it's late, even if it's too late. The very worst thing you can do is totally disappear. And I can pretty much promise you that any advisor or professor at Eastern, if you reach out, they're going to meet you. Even if you're reaching out late, even if you're reaching out really late, they're going to try to find a way forward with you as long as you make some effort to connect with them. Even though we have a very squirrely culture about time and being on time, and our culture has all these specific rules, most professors have a really big heart. They want you to learn and they want you to succeed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this job. So reaching out is always a good idea. So if you end up being late, let's talk about some of the templates you can use to communicate about lateness. So the structure here is very similar to the basic structure for emailing in college and academic environments. It starts with the greeting of the highest title, in this case, Dear Dr. Kenji. Then the apology. This person just writes, I'm sorry. Then the reason. I'm not going to be able to complete the assignment on time. My son has a fever and I need to take him to the doctor. So that's why I'm not going to be able to complete it. If this is not an emergency, then write what your plan is going forward. I will complete it on Friday. If this is an emergency, maybe you don't have time to think of a plan, that's fine. But if it's not an emergency, make a plan. Then the gratitude, thank you for understanding, and the signature. So assuming you have the time to make a really good explanation email for being late, this is the structure: greeting, apology, reason, next steps, gratitude, and then your signature. Here's another example. This person messed up. They missed the meeting and they didn't tell the professor ahead of time. So they're going to follow the structure here. Dear Dr. Kenji, I'm sorry I missed our meeting. So apology for missing, understanding that this was a culturally inappropriate thing to do. The reason, my alarm didn't go off and I completely missed the appointment. And so some explanation of why I broke that social rule. Next step, could we reschedule? And then the gratitude, thank you for understanding, and the signature. Okay, now that you've had a chance to look at this lecture, go ahead and answer the questions.